The stars had always promised humanity a future. For 300 years, they had kept that promise. Colonies spread across 3 star systems. 17 worlds carried the mark of human civilization. Children were born under alien skies, never knowing the blue of Earth. It was an age of expansion, of hope, of endless possibility. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the starship, resolute, and watched the darkness between stars. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of too many battles and not enough sleep. The Resolute was his home, had been for 12 years. He knew every sound she made, every vibration in her hull. The distress signal had come 3 hours ago. Mining colony, Kepler 7b. 4,000 souls. The message was broken, fragmented, filled with screaming and then silence. Daniel had pushed the engines hard, harder than regulations allowed. His crew had not complained. They understood. Science officer Laura Mitchell approached him with a tablet in her hands. She was younger than Daniel, with sharp eyes and dark hair pulled back in a practical style. She was the smartest person on the ship, and she knew it, but she never made others feel small for it. "We're approaching the colony," she said. "I'm picking up strange readings." "What kind of strange?" Laura shook her head. "I don't know yet. Energy signatures I've never seen before. And there's no communication from the surface. No emergency beacons, nothing." The Resolute dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the colony world filled the view screen. It was a gray planet, rocky and cold, valuable only for the rare minerals buried in its crust. The mining facility should have been visible from orbit. A cluster of lights against the darkness. There were no lights. Daniel ordered a landing party. He led it himself, despite the protests of his first officer. The shuttle descended through thin atmosphere and touched down near the main colony building. Daniel was first out the door, his weapon ready, his heart beating fast. The colony was dead, buildings stood empty, their doors hanging open. Equipment lay abandoned in the streets. Food sat rotting on tables in the mess hall. It was as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of their daily lives. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the crystal. It covered everything. Walls, floors, machinery, vehicles. A strange crystalline growth, pale blue and faintly glowing, spreading across every surface like a disease. Laura knelt beside a patch of it and ran her scanner over the material. "It's alive," she whispered. "Daniel, this crystal is alive. It's some kind of silicon-based organism, and it's still growing." Daniel felt cold fear settle in his stomach. What happened to the colonists? Laura did not answer for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I'm detecting trace organic compounds within the crystal structure. Human organic compounds." She looked up at him with horror in her eyes. "I think it absorbed them. I think they're inside the crystal." Daniel ordered an immediate evacuation. His team ran for the shuttle, not caring about dignity or protocol. They lifted off and raced back to the Resolute. Daniel was already composing a priority message to Admiral Kevin Brooks at Central Command. This was beyond anything a single ship could handle. This was a threat to all of humanity. The message never sent. The space around them tore open. Reality itself seemed to crack and split, and something emerged from the wound. A ship. But calling it a ship was like calling a hurricane a breeze. It was massive, beyond comprehension, stretching 50 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was covered with the same crystalline material they had found on the colony. It glowed with inner light, pulsing like a heartbeat. All hands to battle stations. Daniel shouted. Chief Engineer Nathan Cole was already at his console, pushing the engines to maximum. He was a big man with hands that could tear metal and a mind that understood machines better than people. "I'm giving you everything I've got, Captain." The alien ship released something. Thousands of smaller craft poured from its hull like insects from a hive. They swarmed toward the Resolute, fast and deadly. Weapons Officer Megan Torres opened fire. She was calm under pressure, always had been, her fingers dancing across her controls with practiced precision. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the enemy. They hit. They exploded against crystalline holes. They did almost nothing. "Minimal damage," Megan reported, her voice tight. "Their armor is absorbing our weapons." The smaller craft returned fire. The Resolute shook as energy beams struck her shields. Warning lights flashed across every console. Systems began to fail. "Ow." "Shields at 60%, Laura called out. 50%. 40. Daniel gripped the arms of his command chair. They were going to die here. All of them. And no one would ever know what happened. Then pilot Eric Sanders spoke up. Eric was young, barely 25, with messy blonde hair and a cocky smile that irritated senior officers. But he could fly like no one Daniel had ever seen. "Captain, there's a gas giant nearby. If I can slingshot us around its gravity well, we might be able to break free." "Do it." Eric's hands moved across his controls. The Resolute turned hard, engines screaming in protest. The alien craft pursued, firing continuously. The shields dropped to 20%. 10%. 5. The gas giant loomed before them, massive and swirling with storms. Eric dove toward it, using its gravity to accelerate the ship beyond normal limits. The Resolute groaned and shuddered. Metal screamed. Something in the engine room exploded, but they pulled away. The alien craft fell behind, unable to match their speed. The crystalline mothership grew smaller on their screens, and then it broadcast a message. The words appeared on every screen on the ship, translated somehow into human language. The voice that spoke them was cold, alien, utterly without emotion. "Your expansion ends. Your species retreats. Or your species dies." The communication cut off. The alien ship turned and vanished back into the wound in space, which sealed behind it as if it had never existed. Daniel sat in silence. His crew stared at their screens, at each other, at him. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. Humanity had always believed they were alone in the universe. They had spread across the stars without meeting another intelligent species. They had grown confident, perhaps arrogant. In their dominance, that confidence died in this moment. Something was out there. Something powerful. Something hungry. And it had just declared war on the human race. Daniel finally found his voice. "Get me a channel to Central Command. Priority 1. The admirals need to know." He paused, looking at the stars that no longer seemed friendly. "Everyone needs to know." The Resolute limped toward home, carrying a warning that would change everything. Behind them, in the darkness between stars, something ancient and terrible was watching. Waiting, planning, humanity stood on the brink of collapse. And they did not even know how close they were to falling, the Great Hall of the United. Human Council had never been so crowded or so afraid. Representatives from all 17 colonies filled the seats, their faces pale, their voices loud with fear and anger. Holographic displays showed the footage from the Resolute again and again. The crystalline ship, the swarm attack, the terrible message. Chancellor Lisa Monroe stood at the podium and waited for silence. She was a small woman with silver hair and steel in her spine. She had led humanity through economic crises and political upheavals. But nothing had prepared her for this. "We face a threat unlike any in human history," she said, when the room finally quieted. "An alien species of unknown origin and unknown capabilities has attacked one of our colonies and destroyed 4,000 of our people. Admiral Brooks will present the military assessment." Admiral Kevin Brooks walked to the podium. He was a career military man, thick and solid, with a face that rarely showed emotion. Today it showed fear, and that frightened the representatives more than anything else. "We are outmatched," Kevin said simply. "Our weapons caused minimal damage to their vessels. Their weapons nearly destroyed the Resolute in minutes. Based on the size and capabilities of the ship we encountered, we estimate their technology is at least 300 years ahead of our own. If they attack in force, we cannot stop them." The hall erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded immediate evacuation to Earth. Others called for a preemptive strike. A delegate from the Mars colonies stood on his chair and screamed that this was all a conspiracy. Daniel Hayes watched from the gallery above. He had delivered his report hours ago and now sat exhausted as politicians argued about the end of the world. Laura Mitchell sat beside him, her tablet filled with data she was still trying to understand. "They're wasting time," Daniel muttered. "They're scared," Laura replied. "Scared people do foolish things." Dr. Paul Bennett approached the podium next. He was the leading xenobiologist in human space, a thin man with thick glasses and nervous hands. His voice trembled as he spoke, but his words cut through the noise. "The crystalline material is alive. It is a silicon-based life form that consumes organic matter and converts it into more of itself. The colonists of Kepler 7b were not killed in any traditional sense. They were absorbed, integrated into the crystal structure." He paused, struggling to continue. "We believe the aliens are either controlled by this material or are composed of it entirely. We have designated them the crystalline hegemony." The hall fell silent. The horror was too great for words. Chancellor Monroe called for a vote on immediate action. The council fractured. Some colonies voted to surrender, hoping the aliens would spare them. Others voted for war they could not win. Earth and its closest allies chose a middle path. Prepare for defense while seeking more information about the enemy. Daniel was promoted to captain and given command of a small task force. His mission was to gather intelligence on the hegemony while the council continued their debates. Laura Mitchell remained at his side as his science officer, determined to find a weakness in the crystalline enemy. 3 weeks later, on the colony world of New Denver, everything changed again. Tony Martinez was a mining engineer, nothing more. He had spent 20 years digging holes in alien soil and extracting valuable minerals. He had never expected to be important. He had never expected to find anything that mattered, but his drill broke through into something ancient. The chamber was vast, stretching for kilometers beneath the surface. Its walls were covered with inscriptions in a language no human had ever seen. Strange machines stood silent and dark, their purpose unknown. And in the center of the chamber, a pedestal held a single glowing crystal. Different from the hegemony material, warmer somehow, almost welcoming, Tony called his supervisor. His supervisor called the colony governor. The colony governor called Earth within hours. Scientists were flooding into New Denver. And Captain Daniel Hayes was ordered to escort them. Dr. Amanda Price was the xenolinguist assigned to decode the inscriptions. She was young and brilliant, with a gift for languages that bordered on supernatural. Within days, she began to understand what the ancient builders had written. This civilization existed millions of years ago, Amanda explained to Daniel and Laura in the underground chamber. They called themselves the Architects, and they faced the same enemy we face now. She pointed to a series of images carved into the wall. They showed crystalline ships attacking worlds, absorbing populations, spreading across the galaxy like a plague. "The hegemony has done this before," Amanda continued. "They consume intelligent species. They add their knowledge, their memories, to the crystal hive mind. They have destroyed hundreds of civilizations across millions of years." Daniel felt cold. "Did anyone ever stop them?" Amanda smiled, and there was hope in her eyes for the first time since the crisis began. "The Architects did. They developed a weapon. And they left the blueprints here for whoever came after them." She led them to the pedestal with the glowing crystal. When she touched it, light exploded through the chamber. Holographic images appeared, showing complex diagrams and equations. Laura gasped as she recognized what she was seeing. "It's a frequency weapon," Laura said. "The crystalline material has a resonance weakness. The right electromagnetic frequency would shatter their molecular structure. This shows exactly how to generate that frequency." It was the answer to their prayers, a way to fight back, a way to win. But they were not alone in the chamber. Tony noticed the shadows first. Movement at the edge of the light. He shouted a warning just as the first crystalline creature emerged from the darkness. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its body covered in the pale blue growth, its eyes empty and glowing. More emerged behind it. Dozens of them. Once they had been human, colonists from Kepler 7b perhaps. now transformed into servants of the hegemony.
Oh.
They followed us, Daniel realized. They've been watching us the whole time. The creatures attacked. Daniel drew his weapon and fired, shattering crystalline flesh. His security team formed a protective circle around the scientists. But there were too many enemies. More kept coming. Tony grabbed a plasma cutter from his belt and began cutting through the creatures with brutal efficiency. Amanda clutched the crystal to her chest, protecting the precious data with her life. Laura transmitted the blueprints to the Resolute in orbit, ensuring the information would survive even if they did not. The fight was desperate and bloody. Soldiers fell. Scientists screamed. The ancient chamber echoed with the sounds of battle. Above them, the sky tore open. Hegemony ships emerged, descending toward New Denver. The enemy had come in force. Daniel made a decision. Fall back to the shuttles. We have to get this data off-world. They fought their way through corridors filled with crystalline horrors. Tony led the way, his plasma cutter clearing a path. Amanda ran beside him, clutching the crystal. Behind them, soldiers died, buying time with their lives. They reached the surface as hegemony ships began bombarding the colony. Buildings exploded. People ran screaming through the streets. The end of another world had begun. The shuttles launched into a sky filled with enemy fighters. Daniel watched from the cockpit of the last shuttle as New Denver burned below him. Thousands were dying. Another colony was falling, but the blueprints were safe. The weapon could be built. Humanity still had a chance. The shuttles docked with the Resolute, and Daniel ordered an immediate jump to faster-than-light speed. They escaped the system just as the hegemony fleet completed their victory. New Denver was lost, but hope survived. And hope, Daniel knew, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The war had come to humanity's doorstep. Colony after colony fell to the hegemony advance. Millions died or worse, absorbed into the crystalline hive mind. Refugees flooded toward Earth and the inner systems, telling stories of horror that spread fear like a disease. On Titan Station, hidden in the shadow of Saturn's largest moon, humanity's greatest minds worked around the clock. The blueprints from the architects were clear, but building the weapon they described was another matter entirely. The harmonic disruptor required materials that barely existed, technologies that had to be invented from scratch, and engineering that pushed the limits of human capability. Dr. Paul Bennett led the project. He had not slept more than 3 hours a night in months. His hands shook from too much coffee. His eyes burned from staring at screens. But he would not stop. He could not stop. The survival of his species depended on his success. Laura Mitchell worked beside him, translating the architect equations into practical designs. Tony Martinez supervised the construction teams, pushing workers to build faster, better, more precisely. Amanda Price continued to decode additional data from the crystal. Finding new insights that improved their designs, Captain Daniel Hayes visited when he could. Between missions to evacuate colonies and gather intelligence, each visit showed him progress, but also showed him how far they had to go. The disruptor was massive, requiring a ship-sized platform to house its generators. And even when complete, it would need a specific element to function, an element found only in the cores of dying stars. Without the element, the weapon is useless, Paul explained during one visit. It's called stellar radiance. The architects harvested it from a star in its death throes. We need to do the same. Daniel nodded slowly. Where's the nearest dying star? Deep in hegemony-controlled space, a red giant about 200 light-years from here. It's scheduled to go supernova within the next few years, and that's where we're going. The mission was suicide. Everyone knew it. Volunteers stepped forward anyway, more than Daniel could take. He selected his crew carefully, choosing people he trusted. People who understood what was at stake. Nathan Cole, his chief engineer, refused to be left behind. You'll need someone to keep the engines running when everything goes wrong. And everything will go wrong. Megan Torres cleaned her weapons with a calm smile. I'm not missing the chance to shoot something that can actually hurt these crystal bastards. Eric Sanders ran his hands over his pilot console like a musician with an instrument. No one else can fly this mission. You know that. New faces joined them. Navigator Claire Edwards, who had memorized every star chart in human space. Dr. Kate Sullivan, a medical officer who had served on the front lines of the evacuation. Security Chief Marcus Penn, quiet man with a reputation for keeping people alive in impossible situations. The Resolute departed. Titan Station on a cold morning in February. Behind them, construction continued on the harmonic disruptor. Ahead of them, enemy territory and almost certain death. The journey took 3 weeks. They moved carefully, avoiding hegemony patrols, hiding in asteroid fields and gas clouds. Claire's navigation was flawless. Eric's piloting was inspired. They penetrated deeper into enemy space than any human ship had gone before. They saw things that haunted their dreams. Worlds covered entirely in crystal, their surfaces gleaming with stolen light, fleets of enemy ships moving with terrible purpose. And once, they passed close to a world that was being consumed. Its population screaming on emergency frequencies as the crystal grew over everything. Daniel wanted to help. He wanted to turn the ship around and fight, but he could not. The mission was too important. Billions of lives depended on their success. So he listened to the screams and did nothing. And a part of him died inside. The red giant star filled their view screen on the 22nd day. It was enormous, bloated, and dying, its surface rippling with solar storms. Deep within its core, stellar radiance waited. "We need to get close," Lara explained. "Very close. The element exists in a narrow band around the core. We'll have minutes to harvest it before the radiation kills us all." Nathan had modified the shields to handle the heat. Kate had prepared medical tray. Atments for radiation exposure. Everything that could be done had been done. The Resolute dove into the star. Heat washed over them despite the shields. The hull groaned under thermal stress. Warning alarms screamed. Crew members sweated and prayed and watched their instruments with desperate hope. "I'm detecting the element," Laura called out. "Deploying collection systems now." Mechanical arms extended from the ship's hull, scooping up superheated material from the star's outer layers. Filters separated the precious stellar radiance from common stellar matter. Slowly, impossibly, the collection tanks began to fill. "We've got company," Megan shouted. Hegemony ships emerged from the star itself, rising through the flames like demons from hell. They had been waiting, hiding in the very place humans needed to go. It was a trap. "Get us out of here," Daniel ordered. Eric pulled the ship into a desperate climb. Enemy weapons fire streaked past them, striking the star's surface and sending up massive flares. The Resolute shook and bucked like a wild animal. "Shields failing," Nathan reported. "Hull temperature critical. We can't take much more." "Collection at 60%, Laura added. 70. "We need more time." Daniel made a decision. "All weapons covering fire. Give us that time." Megan opened up with everything they had. Plasma bolts and missiles and experimental weapons tested for the first time in combat. The hegemony ship scattered, regrouping for another attack. 80%, 90. A hegemony beam struck the engine section. Fire erupted. Crew members screamed. Nathan ran toward the flames, grabbing an extinguisher, shouting orders to his engineering team. 100%. Collection complete. "Eric, get us out now." The pilot's hands flew across his controls. The Resolute accelerated on a vector that should have torn the ship apart. They burst free from the star's gravity, racing for open space. But the hegemony was not finished. A crystalline ship moved to block their escape. It was smaller than the mothership they had first encountered, but still massive, still deadly. There was no way around it. "Ramming speed," Daniel said quietly. Eric looked at him with wide eyes. "Captain, they'll expect us to turn. They'll expect us to run. We go straight through." The Resolute accelerated toward the enemy ship. Megan fired everything, punching holes in the crystalline hull. The hegemony vessel began to break apart, but not fast enough. All hands braced for impact. They hit. Metal screamed against crystal. The Resolute tore through the enemy ship like a bullet through glass. Debris showered around them. Systems failed. Lights went dark, and then they were through. Eric corrected their course with hands that barely trembled. Nathan reported that engines were damaged but functional. Kate began treating the wounded. Marcus organized search and rescue for crew members trapped in damaged sections. Behind them, the hegemony fleet was still coming. But the Resolute was faster now, unburdened by stealth. Racing for home with the precious cargo that could save humanity, they had done the impossible. They had stolen fire from the heart of a dying star. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. The Resolute limped into Titan Station with half her systems dead and a third of her crew in medical bays. But she carried the stellar radiance in her hold, and that made everything worthwhile. Dr. Paul Bennett wept when he saw the glowing containers. For the first time since the war began, he believed humanity might actually win. Captain Daniel Hayes did not weep. He stood in the corridor outside the medical bay and stared at the wall. Behind that wall, his oldest friend was dying. Nathan Cole had stayed in the engine room throughout the escape, keeping power flowing to the shields and weapons, even as fire consumed everything around him. He had saved them all. The price was burns, covering 80% of his body in radiation damage that no medicine could fully repair. Dr. Kate Sullivan emerged from the medical bay with tired eyes. "He's asking for you." Daniel entered the room and approached the bed. Nathan was wrapped in regeneration bandages, only his face visible. His eyes were clear despite the pain medications. "Still sharp, still Nathan. Did we make it?" Nathan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We made it. The element is being integrated into the weapon now. Paul says it will be ready in 6 weeks." Nathan smiled, or tried to. "Good, that's good." He was silent for a moment, gathering strength to speak. "I'm not going to see it, am I? The end of this war." Daniel wanted to lie. He wanted to tell his friend that everything would be fine, that modern medicine could work miracles, that Nathan would be back on his feet in no time. But he could not lie to this man, not after everything they had been through together. "No," Daniel said. "You're not." Nathan nodded slowly. "Take care of them. The crew. Their family. I will." And Daniel. Nathan's hand reached out, found Daniel's arm, gripped with surprising strength. "Win. Whatever it takes. Win." Nathan Cole died 3 hours later, surrounded by crew members who loved him. Daniel did not cry. He could not afford to cry. There would be time for grief after the war. If he survived, 6 weeks became 5, then 4. Paul Bennett drove his team mercilessly, but also drove himself harder than anyone. The harmonic disruptor took shape in the massive construction bay of Titan Station. It was a thing of terrible beauty, a weapon designed by an ancient civilization to destroy a threat that had haunted the galaxy for millions of years. Meanwhile, the hegemony advanced. Colony after colony fell silent. The outer systems were lost. The middle systems were under attack. Earth itself prepared for invasion. Its skies filled with defensive satellites, and its surface dotted with emergency bunkers. Admiral Kevin Brooks commanded the defense from his new flagship, the Dreadnought Unity. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built. Designed with every advantage the architect blueprints could provide, but even the Unity was not enough to stop the hegemony alone. Chancellor Lisa Monroe addressed the human race in a broadcast that reached every corner of remaining civilization. "We face our darkest hour," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear in her heart. "But we are not defeated. We have a weapon that can end this war. We have soldiers willing to use it. And we have something the hegemony will never understand. We have each other. We have hope. We have the stubborn refusal to surrender that has defined humanity since we first looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them." The speech rallied the people. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Factories worked triple shifts. Scientists shared breakthroughs freely, competition forgotten in the face of extinction. Humanity came together as it never had before, united by the simple desire to survive. The harmonic disruptor was completed on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Laura Mitchell ran the final calibrations herself, triple-checking every system. When she announced that the weapon was ready, Cheers echoed through Titan Station, but there was a problem. The disruptor has to be deployed at the center of the enemy formation, Laura explained to the assembled commanders. The frequency will propagate outward from the detonation point. Anything crystalline within 100,000 kilometers will be destroyed. But outside that range, the effect diminishes rapidly. Admiral Brooks studied the tactical display. So we need to punch through their lines, get a ship to their center, and activate the weapon. Yes, and the ship that carries the weapon won't survive the detonation. The frequency will destroy enemy vessels, but it will also overload our own systems. Anyone aboard will be killed. Silence fell over the room. Everyone understood what this meant. Someone would have to die to save humanity. I'll do it, Daniel said. Laura started to protest, but he raised a hand. I've lost too many people in this war. Friends, crew members. Nathan, I'm not asking anyone else to make this sacrifice. The Resolute will carry the weapon. I'll deploy it myself, the commanders argued. But Daniel would not change his mind. In the end, they accepted his decision. The harmonic disruptor was installed in the Resolute's cargo bay. The ship was modified for maximum speed and maneuverability. A skeleton crew volunteered to fly with Daniel, knowing they would not return. Eric Sanders was among them. Someone has to pilot this boat. Might as well be the best. Megan Torres checked her weapons. If we're going to die, I want to take as many of them with me as possible. Laura Mitchell refused to stay behind. I built this weapon. I need to be there when it fires. Tony Martinez appeared at the dock, a bag over his shoulder. I'm good at blowing things up. Figure you could use me. Amanda Price came too, and Claire Edwards, and Marcus Penn, and a dozen others who refused to let Daniel face the end alone. They were not a crew anymore. They were a family. The Hegemony fleet appeared on long-range sensors 3 days later. Over 500 crystalline ships, more than humanity had ever seen assembled in one place. They moved toward Earth with the slow inevitability of a glacier, crushing everything in their path. Admiral Brooks deployed the human fleet to meet them. 200 warships, everything humanity had left. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and they knew it. But they flew forward anyway, because retreat was no longer an option. The Resolute hung back, waiting for the right moment. Daniel watched the battle develop on his screens, watched human ships engage the enemy, watched the first casualties fall. His hands gripped the arms of his command chair until his knuckles turned white. There, Laura said suddenly, pointing at the tactical display. The largest ship in their formation, near the center, that's their command vessel. If we can get close to it and detonate the disruptor, we'll take out their entire fleet. Daniel nodded. Eric, plot a course. The pilot's fingers danced across his controls. Course plotted. It's going to be rough, Captain. We'll have to go through the heart of their formation, and that's what we'll do. Daniel opened a channel to the entire ship. His crew looked up from their stations, their faces determined despite the fear. This is the end, Daniel said simply. Everything we've fought for, everyone we've lost, it all comes down to this moment. I won't lie to you. Most of us won't survive. Maybe none of us will. But if we succeed, humanity lives. Our families live. Our children live. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. Now let's finish this. The Resolute surged forward, diving into the inferno of battle. Behind them, the stars watched and waited to see who would survive. The battle for Earth was the largest in human history. 200 human ships faced over 500. Crystalline vessels in a sphere of space that stretched for millions of kilometers. Weapons fire painted the darkness with brilliant colors. Ships exploded in silent flowers of flame. Men and women died by the thousands, fighting for a world most of them had never seen. Admiral Kevin Brooks commanded from the bridge of the Unity, his voice calm as he directed the defense. 3rd Fleet, reinforce Sector 7. 5th Fleet, covered the evacuation transports. All ships, by time for the Resolute. On Earth below, Chancellor Lisa Monroe watched the battle from the command bunker. Beside her, screens showed evacuation progress. Millions of civilians were being moved to underground shelters, protected from orbital bombardment by meters of rock and steel. Children clutched toys and asked their parents what was happening. Parents had no answers. The Resolute cut through the chaos like a blade through flesh. Eric Sanders flew with impossible skill, dodging crystalline weapons fire by meters, threading through gaps that should not have existed. Megan Torres fired continuously, her weapons hot enough to glow. The ship shook and screamed, but kept moving forward. "Shields at 40%, Laura reported. "We're taking too much damage." "Keep going," Daniel ordered. "We're almost there." The Hegemony command vessel loomed before them, larger than any ship humanity had ever built. Its crystalline surface pulsed with malevolent light. Smaller ships swarmed around it, trying to intercept the Resolute before it could reach its target. Admiral Brooks saw what was happening. All available ships, clear a path for the Resolute. Everything we have now. Human vessels converged on the command vessel's defenders. It was not a battle. It was a sacrifice. Ships threw themselves at the enemy, buying seconds with their lives. Captains spoke final words to their crews. Crews spoke final words to their families. And then they died one by one, making a path through the crystalline swarm. The Unity herself joined the assault. Kevin Brooks ordered ramming speed, driving his massive dreadnought directly into the enemy formation. The ship's prow tore through crystalline hulls, clearing a corridor of destruction. "Admiral, the Unity is taking critical damage," his first officer reported. "I know." Brooks never looked away from the screens. "Hold the line." On the Resolute, Daniel watched the Unity begin to break apart. He saw escape pods launching, saw crew members abandoning ship, but Kevin Brooks was not among them. The Admiral stayed at his post until the very end, his ship's guns still firing as it came apart around him. "For humanity," Brooks said. His final transmission, cutting out as the Unity exploded. The sacrifice was not in vain. The path to the command vessel was clear. Eric Sanders pushed the engines to maximum, racing for the target. Behind them, the remaining human fleet fought desperately to keep the path open. They reached the command vessel. The Resolute was barely functional, her hull breached in a dozen places, her weapons destroyed, her engines failing. But she was there. "Laura, prepare the disruptor," Daniel ordered. Laura worked her console with trembling hands. "Disruptor charging. Detonation in 60 seconds. Eric, get us as close as possible." The pilot nodded and guided the dying ship toward the crystalline giant. Enemy weapons fire hammered them continuously, but the Resolute would not die. She held together through determination and luck and the stubborn refusal of her crew to give up. "Disruptor charged," Laura announced. "Ready to detonate?" Daniel stood from his command chair. He looked at his crew, at the people who had followed him into hell itself. Eric Sanders at the helm. Megan Torres at weapons, even though she had no weapons left to fire. Tony Martinez in engineering, keeping power flowing by sheer force of will. Amanda Price clutching her translation notes as if they might still matter. Claire Edwards tracking their position with precision that would never be needed again. And Laura Mitchell. Standing beside him, her eyes filled with tears she would not let fall. "It's been an honor," Daniel said. "All of you." "Thank you." He reached for the detonation control. His hand stopped. "Captain," Laura's voice was urgent. "The trigger mechanism. It's damaged. The automatic detonation won't work." Daniel looked at the console. She was right. Battle damage had corrupted the firing system. Someone would have to stay behind and activate the weapon manually. There would be no chance of escape. "Everyone get to the escape pods," Daniel ordered. "Now, I'm staying," Laura said immediately. "No, you're the best scientists we have. Humanity needs you to rebuild after this. Humanity needs you to..." They argued, precious seconds ticking away. Other crew members tried to volunteer. Tony Martinez grabbed Daniel's arm and tried to physically drag him toward the escape pods. Daniel shook him off, and then Eric Sanders spoke from his pilot's seat. "I'll do it." Everyone turned to look at the young pilot. He was smiling, that cocky smile that had irritated so many senior officers. But there was peace in his eyes now. "You need Daniel to lead. You need Laura to rebuild. Tony, Amanda, Claire, they all have something to contribute. Eric shrugged. I'm just a pilot. Anyone can push buttons after I'm gone. Eric, ... Daniel started. Go, Captain. All of you, go. I'll make sure this thing fires. He turned back to his controls. I'll make sure they remember us. There was no time to argue. No time for proper goodbyes. Daniel and the others ran for the escape pods, their hearts breaking with every step. Behind them, Eric Sanders began the final approach to the detonation point. The escape pods launched just as the Resolute reached the heart of the hegemony formation. Daniel watched through the tiny viewport as his ship, his home, positioned herself for the final act. Eric's voice came over the radio, calm and steady. All hands, this is Pilot Eric Sanders. It has been my privilege to fly with you. Tell them we didn't go quietly. Tell them we fought. A paused. Detonating in 3, 2, 1. Light exploded from the Resolute. Not flame, not destruction, but light, pure and brilliant and terrible. The harmonic disruptor activated, sending its killing frequency outward in an expanding sphere. The crystalline command vessel shattered first. Its surface cracked like ice on a frozen lake. Light poured from the cracks, and then it simply came apart, breaking into a billion glittering fragments. The destruction spread outward. Every crystalline ship within range suffered the same fate. Hulls fractured. Structures collapsed. The mighty hegemony fleet dissolved into a cloud of sparkling debris. The remaining enemy ships, those beyond the weapons range, stopped their attack. They hung motionless in space for a long moment, as if confused. Then, one by one, they turned and fled, jumping into faster than light. Travel and disappearing into the darkness. Between stars, the war was over. Daniel watched the enemy retreat from the viewport of his escape pod. Around him, other pods drifted among the debris. Human ships moved through the wreckage, searching for survivors. And slowly, impossibly, people began to cheer. 3 days later, Daniel stood on Earth for the first time. The sky was blue. The grass was green. Children played in parks, their laughter carrying on the wind. Laura stood beside him, her hand in his. Behind them, the survivors gathered. Tony and Amanda and Claire and Marcus and all the others who had made it through, they were broken. They were grieving. They had lost everything, but they were alive. Humanity was alive. What now? Laura asked. Daniel looked up at the stars. They seemed friendlier now, full of possibility rather than threat. Somewhere out there, the hegemony survivors were fleeing. Somewhere out there, other species might be facing the same threat humanity had survived. Now we rebuild, Daniel said. We recover. We grow stronger. He turned to face his people, the remnants of a species that had almost been destroyed. And then we make sure no one else has to go through what we went through. We find the hegemony. We finish what we started. Laura squeezed his hand. Together? Daniel smiled for the first time in months. Together, the universe had tried to break humanity. It had pushed them to the brink of collapse, to the brink of ruin. It had taken everything they had and demanded more.